All right, this is chapter 33 of The Night Singer. 33. What a dump, Eric muttered. He fastened his seat belt before starting the engine, the stench of the house still lingering in his nose. Old sweat and cigarette smoke, plus a hint of something worse, vomit and urine. It was obvious that Fanny was not in good shape, but they had eventually managed to get her fingerprints after all. Having a drug user for a parent is no excuse, said Hannah, or an absent parent for that matter. Of course not, but sometimes it can be part of the explanation at least. A drunk. That was what his colleagues in the station cafeteria had called Hannah's father. Eric's curiosity had led him to Google the murder. He couldn't assess the investigation itself without leaving a trace. He couldn't access the investigation without leaving a trace after all, and he had learned that Lars Dunker had spent 10 years in jail before returning to Oland, where he died 4 years later. That was probably how long it had taken him to drink himself to death. An article published just after the trial mentioned his 2 children, but said nothing about a wife. Do you think we should get in touch with social services? He asked. It hasn't helped so far, said Hannah. I didn't count, but they've been contacted on at least 20 occasions. He wanted to ask her what she thought could help, but they were in the middle of a murder investigation. Their first task was to work out what role Fanny had played in Joel's death. Her current state of mind might have more to do with guilt than her home environment. Should we have brought her in? Not yet, said Hannah. Not until we get more evidence. She took a breath like she planned to go on, but no words came out. I'll stop off at the school so we can see how forensics are getting on, he said. Okay. The school was virtually empty by the time they arrived. There was no one in the yard out front, but a child's face appeared in one of the windows, pressing her nose to the glass until a teacher came to lead her away. At one side of the building, there was an officer in uniform keeping watch. For once, Eric didn't know his name, but he and Hannah said hello and then walked around to the woods. The technician working closest to the cordon was called Klaas, and he came over when he spotted them. He had been part of the forensics team that went out to Mockelmosen when Joel's body was first found. How's it going? Asked Eric. We've found the place where Joel Forson was beaten up, Klaas told them. Come through, I'll show you. They followed him over, pausing a few meters from a den the schoolchildren had built. It looked like a teepee. Nyla would have loved playing there, Eric thought. She had really inherited his love of nature. Through the sparse trees he could make out a cornfield. It was no more than 20 or so meters from the school, which was the only building he could see. It was a few meters farther back, said Klaas, pointing to another clearing. Over there? Are you able to tell us any more about what happened? Asked Eric. We can see that the victim was on the ground. So do you think this is where he was killed? Asked Hannah. Probably not. There are quite a few blood splatters, but no more than that. There was more blood in the rest area, so I'd say he likely died there or at some point on the way there, though it seems less likely. If you ask me, he was stabbed somewhere else entirely. The dead don't bleed. That was what the technician was basing his assumptions on. Yet the blood at the rest area could easily have transferred from his blood-soaked sweater, even if he had died elsewhere. Aside from the stab wound, Joel had bruises, a broken rib, and a gash on his temple. Eric guessed that the blood on the ground here had likely come from the latter. Anything else? We've collected some trash, a few candy wrappers, and a cigarette butt, among other things, but I doubt it'll lead anywhere. There have been a lot of kids playing around here since that night. We've lifted a few shoe prints, but we skipped the ones we decided were too small. We'll be packing up and finishing up soon. Right then they heard shouting over by the building. A woman's voice cut through the air. You have to let me go over there. He was my son. Shit, it's Rebecca, said Hannah, hurrying over to her. By the time Eric arrived, Hannah had led her friend away from the cordon. Eric told the officer by the blue and white tape that the technicians were almost done. He looked around. It seemed Fanny and the others had been telling the truth when they said that Joel had gotten up and walked away. But where had he gone? The road in front of the school went just two ways. His home was to the north, but Joel had never made it back there. Instead, he had been found a few kilometers to the southwest. Had Fanny attacked him again? Eric glanced over at Rebecca Forsland. She was still agitated, but Hannah seemed to have the situation under control. She was standing in front of her, her outstretched hands gripping Rebecca's upper arms, speaking so quietly that Eric couldn't hear her, even though he was just a few meters away. His phone rang. Forensics just informed that the knife was the murder weapon. The blood on the blade was Joel's, said Ove. We've also managed to identify the fingerprints, which came from 2 people, Joel and Axel Stanston. The last day. There are 2 mopeds parked outside Guardby School, and Joel wonders who Fanny has dragged along this time. Probably Lucas. He's pretty sure the other moped is his. Joel shoves his phone into his pocket and trudges around the back of the building. He sees their beams of light bouncing around between the sparse, black trunks, but there aren't 2 of them there. There are 3. As Fanny hears him approaching, she tilts her flashlight up toward her face. The icy hatred in her eyes makes Joel want to turn around and run. He doesn't know what he was thinking, how this is going to solve anything, but it's too late for that now. He can't turn back. Lucas is grinning behind Fanny, Tilde standing by his side. The sight of her makes Joel's stomach lurch. What is she doing here? He has only ever been kind to her. Lena told him that someone had locked Tilde in a cupboard in the school gym and that she rarely has anyone to hang out with. That was why he suggested inviting her to the cinema. Though her being here now explains why she looked so guilty on the bus. Joel walks up to Fanny. She is the only one he needs to convince. The others are just noise. I want my money, she tells him. No. What do you mean, no? I already paid you. Not for all of it. I only had 1 bag. Nope, you had 1, and I gave Lena 2. You're lying, and even if Fanny's fist slams into his temple, making the world spin. His head snaps to one side, a branch scratching his eye. Joel hunches over, gasping for air, and Fanny shoves him to the ground. This was clearly the signal the others were waiting for, because all 3 are soon kicking him. For some reason, Fanny's blows are the only ones that hurt. Someone must have dropped their flashlight because the beam is shining straight into his eyes. Should he pull out his knife? If he does, it will just make Fanny angrier, and she is so much stronger than he is. Instead, Joel curls up with his arms over his head. If he protects his head, he might be okay. Kick after kick hits his arms. You're gonna pay, Fanny hisses, and you're going to stop sticking your nose in where it's not wanted. The rage that surges through Joel wipes out any pain. You're fucking crazy, he roars, struggling onto his knees. You're an inbred fucking freak. Fanny is so shocked that she takes a step back. Joel fumbles for his knife, but doesn't have time to pull it out before she steels herself and kicks him in the chest. Joel falls backward and feels a crack. He tries to scream in pain, but all that comes out is panting. The panting is also all that is left of his anger. He curls up again, shielding his head with his arms. That's enough now, says Tilde. Lucas murmurs in agreement. Joel almost hates them more, the pathetic tag-alongs. Maybe because they're much more like him than they are like Fanny. They go along with things, but they have no idea what they actually want. Fanny bends down over him. Your pathetic little outburst didn't help. You hear me? You're gonna pay, and you're gonna stop butting your nose in. Joel searches for his anger again, but all he can find is fear. He wraps his arms tighter around his head. The only thing he can do now is stay still and take it. A small part of him tells him he deserves this, imagining that it could make him feel better, help him hate himself a little less. Fanny's next kick hits one of his hands, tearing it away from his head. Joel isn't quick enough. This time her foot strikes his temple. Blood starts running down into his eye, and he imagines his mother standing in front of him. Her face is covered in blood, as well as her top and her hands. The fear is immediate. Am I about to die? Fanny kicks him again. You're still the same little shit, she hisses. The only freak is you. It's the F slur, and I'm not gonna say that. She spits at him and Tilde grabs her arms. For God's sake! Joel doesn't know whether it is Tilde or Fanny who says it. Everything sounds warped, like maybe Fanny's kick knocked something out of place in his ear. He can hear rushing, clicking. They step back. Joel can no longer see them, the light from the flashlight still blinding him. He struggles up onto all fours, reeling with dizziness. The pain in his chest is the worst. One of his ribs must be broken. Joel wants to get away as quickly as he can, but he forces himself to stay still until the world stops spinning. What are you doing up? Fanny asks. Joel finally manages to pull the knife out of its sheath. Don't come any closer, he roars. I'll cut you. The three others are now staring at him. Joel is standing above the light of the flashlight, no longer blinded by it. The moon comes out from behind a cloud, and their faces look oddly enlarged. Even Fanny looks scared, though he knows her anger will flare up again any moment, and when that happens, he doesn't want to be here to see it. Joel slowly backs away. When he bumps up against a tree, he turns around.